Welcome to Horsemen. Episode 3, The Red Horse.
And out came another horse, bright red. Its rider was permitted to take peace from the earth, so that people should slay one another, and he was given a great sword. Book of Revelation, chapter 6, verse 4. Mindy Lamb stood in front of her 6th grade class and tried not to collapse. It started with a moment of dizziness and faint, as if the room had just tilted, but only on one side, like half the room was starting to slip down an unseen sinkhole. She steadied herself against her desk and took a moment to catch her breath and assess the situation. The room was not tilting. She was just having a dizzy spell. She had had dizzy spells before. She knew it would pass. But this one lasted a little too long and was a little too unusual to dismiss. She stood still and focused on Cole Benedict's red flannel shirt to keep upright and steady. She counted to herself, 1, 2, 3, 4, and when she got to 7, she heard a voice say, "Miss Lamb, are you okay?" It was Lili Salome, her most studious student, the one that got the highest grade on every test. She saw Lili's face and knew that she wasn't fooling anyone. Damn, they could see. Her students now knew something was wrong. "I'm fine," Mindy said, trying to smile. "Just a little what?" She asked herself. A little what? Why couldn't she think of the word? Was she having a stroke? Was this what a stroke felt like? She knew that one of the signs of a stroke was the impaired use of one arm. She looked at her left arm and raised it up. Fine. Then she looked at her right arm and raised it. Fine. Maybe not a stroke. Then she looked at the worried faces of her 6th graders and knew that they were watching her raise her arms and that she still hadn't answered Lily's question, and that Bo Brighton, the biggest kid in the class, was now standing and ready to get some help. Bless him, she thought to herself. He is ready to be a hero. My, how she loved these children. "I'm fine," she repeated, and then took a deep breath in. "I had a dizzy spell, and now it's passed." She looked up. As she surveyed the faces of the children before her, she also surveyed her body. Balance seemed restored. Ability to speak restored. The room was no longer tilted and strange, and she was no longer dizzy. It had passed. She was, in fact, fine. There was a relieved murmur as Bo sat back down and the others shifted in their seats. "I am embarrassed to say that I haven't had enough water today and I pushed it too long," she said, reaching over to the water bottle she kept with her. "This is what happens when you get dehydrated. In fact, let's use this time to all hydrate. Quick water break and then back to dividing decimals." As she took a drink, she watched the children nervously get out of their seats and file over to the cubbies where they kept their backpacks and water bottles. Most had dropped all their worry and concern, though a few, including Lili Salome, were still eyeing her, as if wondering if dehydration was truly the reason for her dizzy spell. Lili had good reason to be suspicious, of course, because this was not the first time her teacher, Mindy Lamb, had had health issues. Early in the year, Miss Lamb had been out of school for nearly a week due to a double ear infection and high fever. She had had dizzy spells the week after she returned, and some of the more sensitive students, like Lili, now watched her very closely. Then, a few weeks before this most recent episode, Mindy had noticed some strange white blotches on her hands, almost as if bleach had splashed on her wrist and turned the skin bright white. Her husband thought it might be vitiligo, an autoimmune disease that prevents skin from producing pigmenting cells, causing blotches like the one on Mindy's hand. And sure enough, her doctor confirmed that it was true. She did not make a big deal about this diagnosis, as she didn't think it was a big deal. It was inconvenient, and it did make her self-conscious, but it wasn't that serious. She was given a prescription for a drug that apparently helped, but she hadn't seen many results. The drug did, however, have some side effects, including issues with her stools, loss of appetite, and dizziness. So that afternoon, when she felt the wave of dizziness, she assumed it was a side effect of the drug. When she got home and reported the dizzy spell to her husband, Terry, who was an emergency pediatrician at the Children's Hospital of Colorado, he made his professional, serious expression. He then insisted she tell her personal doctor and even get more blood tests. "I don't like that you couldn't think of what to say," he said, referring to the moment when she couldn't answer Lily's question. "That's sounding like a side effect to the enzyme inhibitor you're taking. Blood tests would confirm this, but I think you should stop using it for now. I don't want anything messing with your perfect brain." Mindy loved when he said things like this. Not so much the perfect brain part. She wasn't much for flattery, and besides, she knew her brain was far from perfect. No, she liked when he took charge and prioritized her health. Terry was born and raised to be a man's man, a take responsibility and protect your family sort of man. He was even ready to fight if need be. Mindy felt safe with him, and it gave her the space to focus on her teaching. Teaching was everything to Mindy. She and Terry were not able to have children of their own, and though she sometimes wondered what it would be like to hold her own baby, she didn't have regrets. She had her students. She loved them, and they loved her. What else did she need? "Okay, I'll get it scheduled," she said, and gave him a big hug. "But don't blame me if I end up looking all spotty like a leopard." "I like leopards," said Terry. He slid his head down to kiss her neck. "They're dangerous, and I like danger." Mindy also liked when he said things like this. She loved her husband. She loved being with him and looking forward to seeing him at the end of the school day. She also loved her job and looked forward to seeing the children on her drive to work. In general, Mindy Lamb felt very lucky. That is, until she got the results of the lab tests. Terry wasn't with her. He was at the Children's Hospital in Aurora, and she was in downtown Denver. Both she and Terry were expecting her doctor to say the dizzy spells were due to the vitiligo medication. But the moment her doctor came into the room, she knew something was up. She knew Dr. Multandani to be a gentle, warm woman who always made eye contact and took time to talk before getting to business. Today, however, she was frowning at the papers in her hands and wouldn't even look up. "Well," she said, studying the numbers on the printed test results, "I found something curious, and I'd like to take more tests." They did take more tests, and Mindy waited while they were rushed to the lab. She waited a long time and worried until her doctor returned, looking even more serious. "Well," she said, again studying the papers, "so your numbers are telling me something is going on with your heart, some kind of cardiomyopathy. Now, there can be many reasons for this, but your numbers, plus your history with autoimmune conditions, are making me think this could be giant cell myocarditis, which is pretty serious." Mindy stopped paying close attention to what her doctor was saying at this point. She heard the words biopsy and transplant and steroids, but Dr. Multandani's voice now seemed underwater, as if the current conversation was part of a dream or some distant memory. She left the office that day with a plan. She was going to go to the hospital in 2 days for the heart biopsy. But it all seemed like something from a movie, like she was watching the events of her life from a distance. And when she spotted her car in the parking lot of the clinic, she had a sudden flash, a memory of something that happened, not in her actual life, but in a dream the previous night. She was in a familiar place. It was a kind of train depot, a roundhouse, she thought they were called, where train engines are fixed or stored and then dispatched. It was called a roundhouse because there was a round turntable on the ground that took the engine, turned it, and aligned it with one of several garages. The engine would then enter the garage for work or to simply remain until it was time to be used again. In the dream, Mindy was standing in the center of the turntable, looking at the many garage doors surrounding her. She knew how this worked. Each of those doors were entrances to unique places in time and space, different lands she could enter, inhabit for a while, and then leave. She knew that some of these lands also had guides that would meet her, teach her things about the land, or the time, or other people she might meet inside. She remembered standing in the center, feeling grateful and excited when she saw one of the garage doors open. "Maisie," she said out loud, naming the guide she knew she would be seeing inside. Then she walked forward and entered a bright, blinding white light. But as soon as her foot touched the space within, the light began to organize into scenery. She was now standing in the countryside, in a wide-open, flat grassland. The grass was now amber with age and dryness. This was a new place, and it surprised her. Usually when she met with Maisie, they were in the mountains. But here there were no mountains to be seen. In fact, there was nothing but amber grass. Then she spotted the familiar form of Maisie walking toward her. She was a tall woman with a loping but graceful stride. Her hands were outstretched as she walked, touching the grain of the grass on either side. Maisie smiled at her, and Mindy smiled back. "Where are we?" Mindy asked. "North Dakota," said Maisie. Then she raised her eyebrows as if she might be joking. "I wanted to introduce you to someone who will be helping you in this next phase." "Next phase?" asked Mindy. "Mm-hmm," answered Maisie with a mixture of kindness and maybe pity. "You are going to get very sick, or at least that is what the doctors will tell you. But it is not what you think. That is why I want you to meet Edna Madsen." Mindy looked past Maisie and saw a young woman, a girl of maybe 16 or 17, walking toward them. She was wearing what looked a little like a costume, a frock from the Victorian age, perhaps, and her hair had been cut short in spiky tufts. It looked like she had cut it by herself and done a very bad job. Mindy felt nervous about this girl. There was something strange about her, something dangerous. She seemed like she was not in her right mind, that she might be mentally off balance. She didn't want to be guided by the girls, so she looked back to Maisie. But Maisie had disappeared. The girl, Edna, came up to Mindy, who took a step back. But the girl only sat on the ground and played quietly with the grass. After a few moments, Edna said, "You'll be scared, but that's how it goes sometimes." Mindy looked at the girl and felt a deep dread overcome her. She felt that something bad was going to happen, something very difficult and dangerous. And then she felt the wind pick up. She saw the grass start to weave and the sky become brighter. "Oh," said Edna, looking up and shielding her eyes from the growing light, "they're back." "They?" asked Mindy, who was also trying to see whatever was now overhead, shining a bright light all around them. "From Alpha Centauri," said Edna, smiling. "I guess it's time." And that was the end of the dream. Mindy remembered all of it while standing next to her car. It seemed so familiar, as if she had been to that roundhouse many times before, met Maisie many times before. And the truth was, she had. She had had this dream many, many times, meeting Maisie and others at the roundhouse, but she seldom remembered after the experience was over. Like many dreams, they quickly faded away. But this time she remembered everything, especially the words, "You are going to get very sick." Well, here she was, apparently very sick. Giant cell myocarditis, a very serious autoimmune disease that would likely require a heart transplant. Yes, that qualified as very sick. So with a curious, almost out-of-body lightness, she got into her car and started driving. She intended to drive home, but was suddenly in a neighborhood that was unfamiliar to her. Where was she? She must have missed the on-ramp to the highway and needed to turn around. Planning to take a U-turn at the underpass ahead, she stopped at a stoplight. A homeless man with a beard, long coat, and a sign was standing at the corner. Mindy read the sign, which was written in black marker on cardboard. "From Alpha Centauri, need uranium for ship. Anything helps." The words Alpha Centauri made her swoon. It was what the girl in her dream had said when looking up at a bright light overhead. "They're back," she'd said. "I guess it's time." So, without thinking, Mindy rolled down her window and asked the man if he were from Alpha Centauri. It was a crazy thing to ask, of course, but the coincidence was too great. The homeless man was taken aback at first, and she realized that it was, in fact, a coincidence. It was a joke for him, a way to entertain drivers so they would give him money. So she did. Feeling utterly empty of hope, she gave him a $10 bill. She had never given a homeless person money before, having been led to believe that most homeless people were there due to drug or alcohol addiction, and giving them money only perpetuated the problem. Instead, she handed out granola bars or cans of tuna when she thought to carry them in her car. But this time she didn't care. Take $10, go get high, she thought to herself. But then the man said something, almost like he didn't mean to, like he was a part of her dream. He told her to find a man named Dr. Raymond Anadar, that he had a clinic that could help her. Then she heard a honk behind her, and in a fluster she left. She drove forward. She didn't do the U-turn as planned. She just drove. She kept driving and somehow ended up on a small highway. The view was familiar. She had driven this highway before. When she saw the number 36, she knew where she was headed. It was as if she were being guided, just like in her dreams. She was headed to Boulder. She had a dear friend in Boulder who was a yoga teacher. It hadn't occurred to her to contact her friend Lisa, but as she drove west, she realized her friend was the perfect person to talk to. Her husband, Terry, was going to freak out. She knew this. He hated when she didn't feel well, and this news was not at all what they were expecting. She didn't want to experience his panic. No, Lisa would handle it well. She would just hold her and tell her everything was going to be all right. That was what she needed. This idea brought her calm. She focused her thinking and feeling on a glimmer of hope. Not hope to get better, but just hope of being held and comforted. So she followed the familiar route to downtown and found a parking spot in front of Lisa's yoga studio. She had hoped there wasn't a class in session and was thrilled to see that one was just letting out. It was a hot yoga class, and everyone exited the studio drenched in sweat, which did not look all that appealing to Mindy. She waited for the last of the students to leave, then gathered herself together and walked in. Lisa was at the front desk, drinking some enhanced water drink. When she saw Mindy, she broke into a wide smile and held out her arms. "Hi, honey," she called, pantomiming a hug. "I'm gross, so I'm not going to hug you." "Oh, how are you?" Mindy had meant to smile and ease into the news, but instead she burst into tears. 15 minutes later, sitting in the changing room, knee to knee and holding hands, Mindy finished telling her friend everything that she had learned from the doctor. Lisa pulled her in and gave Mindy exactly what she needed: love, acceptance, and hope. "It's going to be all right," she said. "I know it is." Mindy cried a little more, and then she flashed on the dream again. She knew her friend loved dreams and took them very seriously, so she told her about the girl and the light and what she had said about Alpha Centauri. "Oh, wow," said Lisa, true to form. "Now that is good. That is really good, because that is the crazy part of you, the insane girl that no one listens to. She knows how you are going to get better, and it's a totally foreign kind of healing, an alien healing, maybe even literally. I totally believe that aliens are here on the planet watching us and helping us. No doubt, really. So I think your dream is encouraging you to go outside the normal medical route. I know Terry won't be comfortable with this, but that's okay. Maybe you can do both." Mindy nodded. She wasn't sure how to respond, but there did seem to be a ring of truth to her friend's dream interpretation. She said, "And what's really strange is that a few minutes later, I saw a homeless guy with a sign that said he was from Alpha Centauri." It was a joke, but still, pretty weird, right? "That is confirmation," said Lisa, who was now wide-eyed. "You know that I'm all woo-woo about this sort of thing, but that is total confirmation, Mindy. Total. You need to look for alternative help. At least, that's my interpretation. Only you know what's best for you. Just know that the healing world is very big, very wide, and there's lots of room for some magical and honoring ways to heal the body." Again, Mindy nodded. Her husband would not like this conversation. She knew that if she shared any of this with Terry, he would just get upset and say something like, "I'm all for alternative care, but that's just irresponsible and silly. If you give me some science, some data, well then fine. But dreams and coincidence are not a healing protocol." Then Mindy remembered what the homeless man had said, and she asked Lisa cautiously, "Do you know who Dr. Raymond Anadar is?" Lisa looked a little confused. "Sure. He wrote A Storied Guide to the Future and... what was it called? Like The Myth of Illness. I haven't read that yet. But you know he has a center out west of Pueblo near La Junta, I think. Why?" "Oh," said Mindy, I just heard his name and was curious." She decided not to tell Lisa that she learned the name from the Alpha Centauri homeless guy. She felt confident that the layers of serendipity would make Lisa even more enthusiastic and borderline pushy. She didn't want any more solutions at the moment. She just wanted her reassuring friend. "Whatever you do," Lisa said when it was time for Mindy to go, "just check in and see how you feel. I'll call you later with some names of healers I like and that I think would be options. If any of them don't feel right, don't go. But if one of them does, then just give it a try. Same goes for Dr. Anadar. If you find out that his center sounds even a little interesting, check it out, Mindy. Heavy drugs and transplants don't have to be the only option." "Oh, honey." Then Lisa pulled her in again. She squeezed Mindy tight and shed a few sympathetic tears. "I am here for you. Whatever you need." Mindy nodded, feeling deeply grateful for her friend. And then she went home. After listening to her husband's voice messages asking her how the appointment went, she sat at the kitchen table for a long time. She knew she needed to call him. She knew she needed to tell him. But all she could do was sit still and breathe. Then she thought of what Lisa had said and considered Dr. Anadar's health center or clinic. She closed her eyes and checked in. Was this something to pursue? Should she find out more? As she asked herself the questions, she felt an opening, a kind of ease that loosened the muscles in her chest, muscles she hadn't even known were flexed. That seemed like a yes. So instead of calling her husband, she picked up the phone and called 411 Directory Assistance. She knew this was old-fashioned. It was 1997, and Terry had a new computer with an internet connection. She knew she could look things up herself, but she preferred directory assistance. "What city?" asked the voice. "Pueblo, or actually La Junta." "Name?" asked the voice. "Dr. Raymond Anadar." Mindy listened to her own breathing for a while. Finally, the voice said, "Hold for the number." Mindy wrote down the number, realizing she wasn't sure if this was the phone number of the health center or for Dr. Anadar himself. Was it appropriate to call? Again, she checked in and asked herself how to proceed. She felt a rush of excitement, like she was about to begin a great adventure. And she decided, yes, she would call and then see what happened. She called the number. It rang twice, and then a familiar voice answered, but with a curious, professional tone, as if she were an executive or the secretary to the boss. "Hello, this is Maisie." Maisie? It was the voice and the name of the person in her dreams. Her dreams. She hung up the phone. This was too much and too weird, and she no longer wanted to investigate alternative healing. She immediately picked up the phone and called her husband. "Hi, hon," she said. "So, I have some news."